Israel is launching a major new offensive in Gaza. What does this mean? Just days ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed plans for a big push into Gaza City, and even into central camps like Mawasi. He says it's needed to finish the job against Hamas and ultimately free Gaza, not occupy it. But this comes amid really strong international criticism. The UN is warning of a humanitarian disaster getting even worse, and countries like Germany and Canada are actually pulling back military aid over worries about civilians and international law. And you see these heartbreaking reports, Palestinians killed trying to get food, and protests erupting from Israeli hostage families worried about their loved ones. So what's really going on?
Today we're going to unpack exactly that. We'll look at, the strategy behind this bigger offensive, the pushback from the world, and the complex rules of war that apply in such a densely packed place.
What's really driving this escalation, and what does it mean for everyone caught in the middle?
Okay, let's dive in. So the Israeli Security Cabinet gave the green light for the military to take control of Gaza City and these surrounding areas. What's the significance of focusing on these specific zones, like the central camps and Mawasi? Especially since, over 500,000 displaced people are there now?
It's hugely significant. Gaza City is, the main urban center, and the central camps, including Mawasi, are incredibly crowded. Netanyahu says the goal is clear: finish the job, defeat Hamas completely.
Right.
He insists it's not about occupation, but freeing Gaza, demilitarizing it, and ensuring Israel has overriding security control. Then eventually setting up some kind of non-Israeli civilian administration.
But Mawasi, wasn't that designated a humanitarian zone?
It was. So expanding operations there, where so many displaced people are seeking refuge, it raises immediate, very serious concerns about civilian safety. It makes things incredibly complex on the ground. And Netanyahu suggested this phase would be quick. He called the plan the best way to end the war speedily, implying a fairly short timetable.
He did suggest that, yeah. But how that squares with Hamas's position is a big question.
Which is?
Well, Hamas has consistently said they won't disarm unless there's an independent Palestinian state. So you have this fundamental clash with Israel's goal of demilitarization. It points towards a much longer struggle unless something shifts dramatically.
Netanyahu has also been quite vocal in pushing back against the criticism, hasn't he? Accusing critics of global campaign of lies.
Yes, and he even suggested Hamas was responsible for a lot of the firing near aid convoys, though, without providing concrete proof for that specific claim. It shows how contested the narrative around these events is.
Okay, so this plan to move into Gaza City, it's drawn really widespread condemnation internationally. How does that pushback actually impact Israel's operational plans, do you think?
Oh, it creates huge challenges. You have the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stating very clearly that Gaza is and must remain an integral part of a Palestinian state. That's directly at odds with any idea of long-term Israeli security control without a recognized Palestinian authority.
Mm-hmm.
And another top UN official, Miroslav Jenka, warned this could trigger another calamity. Then you have the European Council President Antonio Costa calling for Israel to reverse course, warning about consequences for EU-Israel relations, saying it undermines international law.
And it's not just words, right? We've seen actual actions from countries like the UK and France echoing these concerns about occupation and displacement.
Exactly. And perhaps more pointedly, Germany, which is usually Israel's biggest arms supplier in Europe, has suspended military exports that could be used in this offensive. And Slovenia, Canada, the Netherlands, they've all halted arms shipments, too, citing humanitarian law concerns. It's significant pressure. Algeria's ambassador even called for sanctions.
Though the U.S. perspective seems a bit different. Vice President J.D. Vance talked about encouraging a rapid end to the conflict diplomatically, getting hostages home, getting aid in.
Yes, the U.S. is navigating a complex diplomatic path. But this international pressure is just one side of it. There's also significant pushback within Israel.
From the hostage families.
Yes, exactly. They're protesting, worried this offensive puts their relatives in greater danger. Some are even calling for strikes. And we saw those huge anti-government protests in Tel Aviv recently.
Right.
But maybe most critically, this plan has reportedly opened a rift between Netanyahu and the IDF leadership. That suggests a real debate at the strategic level about whether this is the right way forward or even feasible.
That's a major internal dynamic. Yet at the UN Security Council, the U.S. defended Israel's right to decide its security needs and called the genocide allegations false. It really highlights the deep international divisions here. Let's shift to the humanitarian situation because, well, the numbers are staggering. The Gaza Health Ministry reports 61,400 deaths since the war started, about half women and children.
It's horrific. And the hunger situation, it's beyond a crisis now. At least 100 children dead from malnutrition-related causes since the war began, plus over 100 adults since just June.
100 children?
Yeah. Ramesh Radhasingham from the UN Humanitarian Office told the Security Council quite bluntly, this is no longer a looming hunger crisis. This is starvation, pure and simple. It's hard to even process that.
And people are dying just trying to get aid. We heard about 26 Palestinians killed on August 10th while seeking supplies. The UN says over 1,300 killed since May doing just that.
Yes, these incidents happen along convoy routes near distribution points. Netanyahu acknowledges hunger and distribution problems, but denies any deliberate starvation policy. He blames media lies and, again, accuses Hamas of stealing aid, though the European Commission, for example, said they found no reports backing that claim up.
Former President Trump also weighed in, didn't he? Expressing concern and urging Netanyahu to make sure they get the food.
He did. He directly contradicted Netanyahu's no starvation claim, saying, based on TV footage, those children look very hungry. And he mentioned the U.S. was going to set up food centers, suggesting a more direct American role in aid distribution, potentially.
This humanitarian crisis isn't just in Gaza either, is it? There's displacement happening in the West Bank, too.
That's right. Israeli operations in the West Bank have displaced around 40,000 Palestinians this year alone, which is apparently the highest number since 1967. And in Gaza, of course, it's over 1 million people displaced. It's a massive ongoing displacement crisis across the board. Okay,
with this level of conflict, devastation, and international outcry, we really need to understand the rules. How does international humanitarian law, IHL, actually apply in a situation like this?
It's the fundamental legal framework, yeah.
Okay.
And it rests on a few core principles. First, distinction. You have to distinguish between civilians and combatants, always. Civilian buildings versus military targets.
Yeah.
Indiscriminate attacks. Those are grave breaches, potential war crimes. Second, precaution. Parties have to do everything feasible to protect civilians. That means verifying targets, giving effective warnings before attacks. And importantly, civilians don't lose their protection just because they couldn't leave or chose not to after a warning.
That seems crucial in such a crowded place.
Absolutely. And third is proportionality. An attack is prohibited if the expected civilian harm, deaths, injuries, damage would be excessive compared to the direct military advantage anticipated. Violating this is also a grave breach, potentially a war crime.
And applying these in Gaza, one of the most densely populated places on Earth, that must be incredibly challenging.
Extremely. The presence of fighters in a civilian building doesn't just greenlight attacking the whole area without considering the civilians there. These rules apply constantly, even in urban warfare.
What about specific protections, like for hospitals or schools?
Yes, hospitals, medical staff, ambulances, they have special protection. They only lose it if they're used for acts harmful to the enemy. And even then, only after a clear warning goes unheeded. Same for cultural sites, religious buildings, schools, historical monuments. They're protected unless used for military purposes.
And yet we hear about so much damage, like almost all schools in Gaza being damaged or destroyed.
Tragically, yes. Over 390 educational facilities destroyed, 90% of schools significantly damaged. It's devastating. Journalists, too, are civilians and must be protected unless they directly take part in fighting. The number killed in Gaza since October 7th is described as unprecedented.
There's also the issue of human shields.
A very serious one. Using civilians to shield military targets from attack is prohibited under IHL, a war crime. And look, both sides, Hamas and the IDF, have faced accusations of doing this.
And the broader context, the blockade.
Right. The closure of Gaza for over 17 years and the current restrictions on aid have been described by some, including UN experts, as amounting to collective punishment, which is forbidden. Punishing the entire population for the actions of some and using starvation as a weapon, explicitly banned.
So with all these alleged violations, what about accountability?
Well, there are mechanisms. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, has an active investigation into the situation going back to 2014, covering alleged crimes by all parties, including Hamas's attacks on October 7th.
And the ICJ case.
Yes. The International Court of Justice is hearing South Africa's case accusing Israel of genocide. They issued preliminary orders back in January. Plus, individual countries can potentially investigate and prosecute grave breaches under what's called universal jurisdiction. So accountability efforts are underway, but these processes are complex and take time.
Looking forward, then, it seems finding a solution is, well, incredibly complex. You hear very different ideas being floated.
Absolutely. Online, among leaders, the viewpoints are miles apart. Some argue defending your country isn't about popularity. Others seriously question what Israel's long-term plan for Gaza actually is.
What kind of alternatives are being discussed?
You hear talk of a two-state solution, maybe with international peacekeepers, or some kind of international coalition to stabilize Gaza. But there's a lot of skepticism, too.
Like what?
Well, questions about whether Arab nations would really step in to manage Gaza temporarily or take refugees. And a big concern, if Hamas is dismantled but the root causes aren't addressed, could new insurgent groups just pop up?
It's helpful to remember the history here, too, isn't it? Israel did pull out settlers and troops from Gaza back in 2005.
Yes, that unilateral disengagement is a key piece of context. But the broader conflict goes back, over a century. Key moments like the 1947 UN partition plan, the 1967 war, the Oslo Accords in the 90s, they all shape where things are now. It's been cycles of violence and attempts at peace for decades.
So it's not just about this current offensive.
Not at all. It's embedded in this long history. The core issues, security for Israelis, self-determination, and basic needs for Palestinians, these keep coming up. Finding a path that addresses all of them sustainably remains the fundamental challenge.
So, to recap, we've looked at Israel's plan for this new offensive, driven by the stated goal of defeating Hamas, but running into really strong international opposition focused on the humanitarian disaster and questions about international law.
And it leaves us with a profound question, really. Given the deep history, the immediate crisis, and the competing demands for security and human rights, what path forward actually offers a realistic chance for a lasting, sustainable future? Not just for Gaza, but for the whole region's stability.
That's a heavy question. Definitely something worth thinking more about on your own.